What's up, guys? I'm back with another video trying to simplify what's known as the Multiple Endocrine Neoplasia Syndromes, or the MEND syndromes, and there's three primary types. So I'm going to just go ahead and write the three primary types going from the top to the bottom of the screen. The first one is MEN1, and then the next two are sort of related to each other, but there are two subtypes within it. So it's going to be MEN2A and MEN2B. So I was kind of tired of getting questions wrong on this just because, excuse me, you would study the material and then you would forget which things is associated with which particular type of MEND syndrome. So you would get a multiple choice question, you would begin to mix up the different types, because it's very easy to do so, because a lot of these kind of can present with similar symptoms, but then certain symptoms can stand out amongst each of them. Okay, so let me change the color to kind of show you how the mnemonic that I'm going to take to approach this, basically. So for MEN1, I'm sure you've heard this. If you've watched any videos trying to figure out the MEND syndromes, you've heard 3 P's. Okay, that's the mnemonic that everyone uses. My question would come in, how do you remember the P? The fact that, okay, it's 3 of something. First of all, how do you remember it's 3, and how do you remember their P's? So this is what I do. I look at the word MEN1. When you see the number 1, you could also write the number 1 like this. You could write MEN1 without, the top and the bottom part. And you know that when you're talking about primary tumors or primary locations of things or a primary syndrome, you basically write it like this. And so when you see that 1 or that Roman numeral 1, you know that you could basically call this the MEN primary, because this is the first of the MEN syndromes. So I basically will remember the word primary when I look at MEN1. And then that will cue you in that we're dealing with the 3 P's. Because how else would you remember that we're talking about the P here, that there are 3 P? It could be 3 M's, it could be 3 of something else. So this will help you when you look at the 1, just remember primary. So this is the 3, now that we can remember that this is dealing with P, and that this is a primary, so just think of a subset, a primary subset, or 3 things, you now can use the 3 P's mnemonic that everybody knows. And that's going to be parathyroid tumors, it's going to be pancreatic tumors, and then the last one is going to be pituitary tumors. Okay, so all of these can be tumors. You're going to basically see a collection of all of these tumors or cancers, and you're going to see the symptoms that it would cause if there would be a tumor in each of these locations. Now this can vary. For example, if you have a specific tumor of just affecting, let's say, glucagon at the pancreas, that's going to present very different than if you would have a tumor affecting, say, only insulin, right? An insulinoma versus a glucagonoma is very different and presents differently. So you would just kind of want to cue into the fact that, okay, these are things that are happening at the pancreas, regardless of what the symptoms is. For parathyroid, you know that calcium levels are going to be altered. That kind of presents pretty uniformly for all the cases. You're going to see alterations in calcium levels. And then pituitary tumors is the most varied one of all of them. In a pituitary tumor, think of all of the things, all the different hormones that come from the anterior pituitary or the posterior pituitary, and a specific tumor for each hormone could arise, right? So there are ones that are more common, like prolactinoma is what they usually like to go after. You'll see an increase in prolactin, and then you'll see alterations in libido and stuff like that. But basically be able to recognize that if you're seeing effects, remember all of the effects that can come from the pituitary, all of the effects that can come from the pancreas, and of course it would be primarily calcium for the parathyroid. So that is the 3 P's. How do we remember that it's P's and that it's 3 of them? The fact that number 1 is like saying this is the MEN primary. This is the primary subset of, and remember the word primary starts with the letter P. Okay, so that's what that one usually people can remember. It gets a little harder now when you go down to MEN2A and MEN2B. And I've stared at this for a while trying to figure out a way to remember to not mix this stuff up, and this is what I've come up with. For MEN2A, basically you need to write out 2A, but kind of write it like this. And then I want you, let me change the color here to show you on the blue that I just wrote. You need to look at the letter A almost like a P. You see how it can make a P from that? So this is MEN2Ps. Right? So there's going to be 2 P's. Okay? And when you studied MEN2A and 2B, you know that all you're dealing with is P's and M's. That's it. P's and M's. If you can remember P's and M's, you have it all. So if there's 2 P's and all of these are primarily presenting with only 3 symptoms, 3 to 4, then you know the only other remaining one has to be the 1M. Okay, so for this one, you've used the mnemonic to get 2 P's. So what are the 2 P's? It's going to be pheochromocytoma. That's going to be common among both of the men 2s. Okay, you're going to see pheochromocytoma in both of them. And then you'll also have in this one parathyroid. That one is unique to the men 2A. And the last one, you have 1M. This is also something that's in common with both men 2A and 2B, and that's a medullary carcinoma of the thyroid. So, pheochromocytoma and medullary carcinoma of the thyroid. If you have pheochromocytoma symptoms, you can automatically eliminate the men 1A. You know then you're only going to, the answer must be either men 2A or men 2B if they're only asking you about these diseases in the multiple choice stem. Okay, so the next one is men 2B. Now this is the one that to me is the most helpful. So if let me change the color to blue again. You look at 2B. I want you to not write 2B like this. I want you to actually write it like this. 2B. Okay? Do you see how this, let me change the color again to put red on the blue. Do you see how this right here looks like the number 3? You see how that could be like this, the number 3? Not only that, it's also the letter M flipped on its side. See, basically, you've just flipped the M up on its one side right here. So we have the number 3 from it, and we have the M, the letter M. So what do we get from that? We get 3M. So there are 3 M's in this condition, then the only other thing is got to be 1P. That's what's left over. So 3 M's and 1P. So what are the 3 M's? The 3 M's is the medullary carcinoma, thyroid. That's one of them. The next one is morphinoid habitus. Basically, they're going to have a body that's going to resemble, like physical features that will resemble Marfan syndrome. So like elongated fingers, and remember they have a risk of the aortic dissection and things like that. So they're very like skinny, long, lanky type of body frame. So morphinoid habitus. And then the last one is mucosal. I'm going to probably write it over here because I ran out of room. Mucosal neuromas. Neuroma is just a benign neural growth off of the neural cells. That's all that is. And it can be at various parts of the body, right? Because neurons are all over the body. So, a mucosal neuroma. Now, specifically, in this, you're going to see mucosal neuroma. Now, what does that encompass? I've seen in a lot of review software and different banks, QBanks, stuff like that, they don't like to, they kind of harp on the fact that this is, you'll see mucosal neuromas along with intestinal neuromas, a subclass of neuroma. But really, if you can just remember mucosal, you know that the intestines are made up of all mucosa. Like there's a massive mucosa that pretty much comprises the intestines. So mucosa is like your lips, your gums, and then also into your intestinal tract. That's all mucosa, lined by mucosa, okay? So just from knowing mucosal neuroma, you know that this is going to be neuromas around your mouth, inside your mouth, in your gums, and then in your intestines. So those are the spots that the neuromas will be located for men 2B. So we've used this 3M's 1P. We've figured out the 3M's, so that's going to be medullary carcinoma of the thyroid, morphinoid habitus, and mucosal neuroma. Now all we have left is the 1P, and remember I told you pheochromocytoma is the 1P for this one, and that's in common with both of the men's. So now let me remove all of this, and let's just do a quick little overview to help you remember. Let's see. So we have men 1, or just call it men primary, right? Because you could add that, and then all of a sudden the 1 now means that's a symbol for primary. So this is the primary subset. These are the 3 P's. P for primary. And what are the 3? Parathyroid, pancreas, I'm just going to abbreviate, and then the last one is pituitary, right? So that's a pretty simple, straightforward. Men 2A, remember, write it like this, and then you could, from this, it looks like P, right? You can make a P from the letter A. This is 2 P's. So 2 P's, and then you have to have 1M left over, right? So then in this one, you're going to have pheochromocytoma. Remember, that's in both of the men 2's. Pheochromocytoma. And then you also have the parathyroid. And then the 1M for this one is going to be medullary carcinoma of the thyroid. Remember I told you, not only is pheochromocytoma in both of the MEN2 subtypes, medullary carcinoma of the thyroid is also in both of the MEN2s. So if it makes it easier for you, you could go ahead and write those out right away. Okay, and that may help you. And then MEN2B, this is the one that is most helpful to me. Write it like this. You see how this is the number 3, look right here, 3, and it's also M flipped upside down, right? See, it's just been flipped on its side. So what do we have? It makes the number 3, and it makes the letter M. So this is 3 M's, and there's only 1 P. That means the 1 P, it's got to be what's left over. So 3 M's, 1 P. Well, what are the 3? Remember I told you medullary carcinoma thyroid, which is in both of them, so that's kind of an easy one to remember. The next one is morphinoid habitus. So just think of like they're going to look like someone with Marfan syndrome, but they don't actually have it. They just look like it, a morphinoid habitus. And then the last one here is the mucosal neuromas. Remember, where is the mucosa primarily located? You always think of it located in your mouth, on your lips, like on your gums, and then also in the entire intestinal tract. So it could be like anywhere in the intestines and etc. So mucosal neuroma. So that takes care of the 3 M's, and then the last thing is just 1 P left over, and that's pheochromocytoma. Okay. So let me kind of talk about now some of these things and how these would present. Remember that a pheochromocytoma comes from the adrenal medulla. There's basically a tumor within the adrenal medulla. That's the part of the adrenal gland that makes the epinephrine and norepinephrine and all that. Now that stuff, if you have tons of epinephrine and norepinephrine, you have a massive increase in blood pressure, heart rate, etc. So that's going to be, they're not going to tell you, oh, a pheochromocytoma. They may make it hard to describe somebody with a massive blood pressure and heart rate, or they'll tell you that there's metabolites of methanephrine in their urine. Now that's another hint that there is clearly too much of adrenaline in their body. Okay, so that's how they would present with pheochromocytoma, which would be in both of the MEN2s. And then morphinoid, that's unique only to MEN2B. So if they have morphinoid mixed with all this stuff, you know right away they're talking about MEN2B. Mucosal neuromas is also unique to only MEN2B. And then the medullary carcinoma of the thyroid would just be a carcinoma at the thyroid. So think of how you would present with a medullary carcinoma of the thyroid dealing with calcitonin and alterations in thyroid hormones is also possible. Okay, so I hope that helped, and I will see you in another video.